Hands on the hood, now.
What am I being accused of?
You match the description. Stop asking questions.
I am a United States Marine. What law have I broken?
It was a Friday afternoon in late October. The sky over eastern North Carolina was gray and flat, the way it gets when summer has finally given up and the cold is starting to move in. Not dramatic, not stormy, just still and heavy, the kind of day where everything feels a little quieter than usual. Corporal Renae Bowman was 3 hours into a drive she had been looking forward to all week. She was 26 years old, active duty Marine, 2 tours behind her, and a weekend with her mother ahead of her. She had leave approved, her bags packed, and nothing between her and Raleigh but a tank of gas and the rest of Highway 24. She pulled off at a station she had stopped at before. Nothing special about it, just a familiar exit with a clean pump and a store that sold decent food. She was still in her uniform, woodland camouflage, name tape across her chest, the Marine Corps emblem sitting right where it always sat. She had not bothered to change. There was no reason to. She was a Marine on approved leave, driving her own car, stopping for gas like anyone else would on a long drive. While the pump ran, she got on the phone with Sergeant First Class Darnell Webb, her squad leader back at Camp Lejeune. It was a routine call. She had a question about her return date and a scheduling detail that needed to be sorted before Monday. Nothing urgent, just the kind of loose end you tie up before you go off the grid for a weekend. What neither of them thought about was the line they were calling on. Webb was at his desk on base, using a standard base communications line. Those calls route through a system that logs everything automatically, time, duration, and a full audio record. It was standard procedure. Background noise. The kind of detail nobody mentions, until it becomes the most important detail in the entire story. Officer Brett Holloway had been with the Fayetteville PD for 8 years. He was assigned to a patrol zone that sat along the edge of 2 military installations, which meant he saw service members regularly. They moved through his zone on their way to and from base, stopping at the same gas stations and fast food places and grocery stores that everyone else used. Holloway knew the area the way officers know territory they have worked for years. The roads, the rhythms, the faces that looked familiar and the ones that did not. His record reflected someone the department was proud of. More commendations than almost anyone else in his precinct. Consistent positive evaluations. Supervisors who described him in reports using a word that showed up again and again. Instinctive. They meant it as a compliment. The ability to read a situation quickly, to act before things developed into something harder to manage. In the language of performance reviews, instinct is a virtue. His critics, and there were some, looked at the same quality and described it differently. In 4 years, Holloway had received 5 civilian complaints. All 5 came from black residents. None of them resulted in any formal discipline. Each one had moved through the review process and come out the other side without leaving a mark on his record. The commendations stayed. The complaints disappeared. The pattern remained. That Friday afternoon, Holloway was parked 2 blocks from the gas station off Highway 24 when the call came through dispatch. A woman in military gear had been reported pacing near vehicles. The caller thought she looked out of place. Holloway told dispatch he knew the location and was already moving. He did not ask what the woman had done specifically. He did not ask the caller to describe a behavior or name a law she had broken. He heard out of place, and he recognized the location, and he went. He did not need more details than that. He never had before. Renae was walking back to her car, bag in hand, still on the phone with Webb, when the cruiser pulled into the lot. She noticed it the way you notice most things when you have been trained to stay aware, calmly, without stopping what she was doing. She had no reason to think it had anything to do with her. Then the officer got out and walked directly toward her. "Stop right there," Holloway said. She stopped. "Put the phone away." She looked at him. "Why?" He told her she had been reported for suspicious behavior. Renae glanced around the lot slowly, the pumps, the cars, the store entrance she had just walked out of, then brought her eyes back to him. Nothing around her looked like a scene. Nothing around her looked like a problem. She was the only person anyone was paying attention to, and she had not done anything. "Can you tell me specifically what I did that was suspicious?" she asked. Holloway told her she was being difficult. "I'm asking a legal question," she said. She did not raise her voice. She did not step toward him. She stood where she was and waited for an answer that did not come. By now, the two customers at the nearest pumps had gone still. One of them had his phone halfway out of his pocket, not sure yet whether to record, watching to see which direction this was going to go. On the base communications line, Darnell Webb had stopped talking mid-sentence. He could hear everything clearly. Holloway's voice, Renae's voice, the specific way her tone stayed level even as the situation around her tightened. Webb had served with her long enough to know what that tone meant. She was not panicking. She was managing. And the fact that she had to manage anything at all told him something was wrong. He did not hang up. With his other hand, he quietly pulled up the base legal officer's number and held his phone, still listening, waiting to see if he needed to make the next call. Holloway told her she was being detained. He ordered her to put her hands on the hood of his cruiser. Renae did not move toward the car. She asked him to state the legal basis for the detention. It was the same kind of question she had been asking since he walked up, calm, direct, and completely reasonable. She was not running. She was not reaching for anything. She was standing on a public lot in broad daylight, in a United States Marine Corps uniform, asking an officer to explain himself. He reached for her arm instead. Renae took one step back. One step. No sudden movement. No raised hands. No aggression of any kind. Just enough space to avoid being grabbed before she had been told why she was being grabbed. She repeated her question. Holloway unclipped the leash. He gave the command, and the dog lunged before the echo of it left his mouth. Renae went down hard. The sound of it cut across the entire lot. Both customers at the pumps started recording at the same moment, as if the impact had pressed a button on both of them at once. One of them had already gone live on Instagram. Neither of them said a word. They just pointed their phones and kept them steady, the way people do when they understand that what they are watching needs to be witnessed. On the base communications line, Darnell Webb heard his Marine hit the ground. He had been still for the last several minutes, listening, hoping the situation would level off. It did not level off. He heard the command. He heard the impact. He heard the sounds that followed. The call system logged the timestamp automatically. 4:47 p.m. Webb did not wait. He did not take a breath and think it over. He had the base legal officer's number already open on his other phone, and he made the call before the noise on the line had even settled. What had started as a routine Friday phone call was now something that was going to require a lawyer. Darnell Webb was 34 years old and had spent 12 years in the Marine Corps. He was not a lawyer, but he knew exactly who to call and exactly what to say when he called them. He reached the base legal officer within 4 minutes of the K-9 deployment. He did not stumble over the details. He gave them everything in order: the timestamp, the location, Renae's full name and unit, and the fact that the base communications line had been live and recording since before the encounter began. He told them the call was still connected. He told them the system had captured all of it. Then he called Major Patricia Okafor. Major Okafor was Renae's commanding officer, and she picked up on the second ring. Webb told her what he had heard. He told her about the stop, the questions Renae had asked, the moment Holloway reached for her arm, and what happened after that. He told her about the timestamp. He told her the whole thing was on record. Okafor did not waste time. She notified the battalion commander before the call ended. The battalion commander notified the base's public affairs officer within the next 20 minutes. By that point, a formal inquiry to the Fayetteville Police Department was already being drafted. All of this happened in less than 30 minutes. From a moment Renae hit the ground to the moment a senior Marine officer was putting words on paper directed at the Fayetteville PD, less than half an hour had passed. That is how fast things move when the person on the other end of the phone knows the system and is not afraid to use it. Webb had stayed on the line because something told him to. He had held the legal officer's number because something told him to do that too. He had not known exactly what was going to happen in that parking lot, but he had known from the first shift in Renae's voice that she was going to need someone in her corner who could move the moment things went wrong. He moved. By that evening, 2 videos were online. Neither one showed the full encounter. The first clip picked up at the moment Holloway reached for Renee's arm. It showed her step back. It showed the command. It showed the dog. It cut out seconds after she went down. The second clip was shorter and started later. Renae on the ground, Holloway standing over her, the K9 being pulled back, another officer arriving on scene. In the corner of the frame, partially visible on the concrete, was her cracked phone. Neither video named her. Nobody in the comments knew who she was yet. But everyone who watched could see the same thing. A woman in woodland camouflage, name tape on her chest, Marine Corps emblem visible, going down in a gas station parking lot while 2 officers stood over her. The comments asked one question over and over in different words. What did she do? Not what the officer does. What did she do? Because nobody watching either clip could find an answer to that in the footage. She was not running in the video. She was not fighting. She was not reaching for anything. She was there, and then she was on the ground, and the part in between moved too fast for anyone watching to fully explain. The clip spread through military community accounts first, then into broader social media feeds. Local Fayetteville news stations began receiving calls from viewers before 8 p.m. Reporters started making their own calls, to the gas station, to the department, to anyone who might fill in what the videos were missing. The Fayetteville PD released a statement that same night. One line. It said an officer had responded to a suspicious person complaint and that the incident was under review. That was it. No details. No explanation. No acknowledgement of the uniform she was wearing or what it meant. Just one sentence designed to close a door that was already wide open. It satisfied no one. It was not meant to. It was meant to buy time. And time was already running out. By Saturday morning, her name was public. Corporal Renae Bowman, 26 years old, active duty Marine, currently assigned to Camp Lejeune. 2 completed tours. A service commendation earned in a forward operating environment. A clean record with no disciplinary actions of any kind. She was not a veteran looking back on her service from a distance. She was not a contractor with a military background. She was active duty, currently assigned, traveling on approved leave, orders signed by her commanding officer. She was by every definition still serving. That information changed the entire conversation. Marine Corps veteran communities moved fast. Former Marines shared both videos side by side with their service record visible in the frame. The tone in those posts was not confusion. It was fury, the specific, focused kind that comes from people who know exactly what that uniform means and exactly what it cost to earn the right to wear it. They did not need anyone to explain why the footage was wrong. They already knew. The Military Times reached out to Camp Lejeune for comment before noon. A veterans advocacy organization announced it was preparing a formal complaint to the Department of Defense. By early afternoon, 3 black female Marine veterans were sitting in front of camera on a morning news segment, not to talk about Renae specifically, but to describe their own encounters with law enforcement while wearing the uniform. Their stories were different. The pattern was not. The department's one-line statement looked smaller by the hour. This was no longer a local story about a suspicious person complaint. It was a national conversation about what a uniform is supposed to mean in this country, and whether it means the same thing for everyone who wears it. Before we go any further, tell us in the comments, should being an active military uniform automatically require an officer to state probable cause before any detention takes place? We want to know what you think. Subscribe right now and turn on notifications. This story is far from over, and you do not want to miss what comes next. The call that started everything came from Linda Pruitt. She was 58 years old, a regular at that particular gas station, the kind of person who stops at the same place so often that the staff knows her order. That Friday afternoon, she had been parked near the air pump, eating lunch in her car, when she noticed Renae. She watched her walk from the pump to the store. She watched her walk back. She watched her stop beside her car and take a phone call. That was all she saw. A woman moving between a pump and a store and then standing still to talk on the phone. That was the behavior she described to dispatch as pacing. When the videos spread that evening and the next morning, Pruitt watched them from her phone like everyone else. She watched the clip of Renae stepping back. She watched the clip of Renae on the ground. She saw the uniform. She saw the name tape. She called her daughter that night and said she felt sick. By the following week, a local reporter had identified her as the caller. When they spoke, the reporter asked her a simple question. What exactly did she see that concerned her? Pruitt could not name a specific action. She said Renae seemed like she was waiting for something. She said the camouflage confused her. She did not expect to see a woman in that uniform alone at a gas station. She said she thought something might be wrong. She never said she saw a crime. When a reporter pressed her on that directly, she answered plainly. No, she had not seen a crime. She had seen something that made her uncomfortable, and she had called it in. That admission, quiet as it was, did significant damage. The entire legal foundation of the stop rested on a suspicious person complaint. That complaint had just been reduced, in the caller's own words, to a feeling. Not evidence, not a law being broken, just a feeling about a black woman in camouflage standing beside her own car. Holloway submitted his incident report at 8 p.m. that same night. According to his written account, the subject had refused multiple lawful commands from the moment he approached her. She had physically moved away from him in a manner consistent with evasion. She had created an unsafe environment that left him with limited options. The K-9 deployment, he wrote, was a necessary escalation following sustained noncompliance. The report was clean, confident, and written in the kind of flat official language that is designed to sound final. Every sentence was constructed to close a door. He described a dangerous situation brought under control by a trained officer making a difficult call in the field. His lieutenant reviewed the report that evening and approved it before midnight. The department's legal team was briefed the following morning and told the commanding officer that the report supported the officer's actions. From a paperwork standpoint, everything was in order. The complaint had come in. The officer had responded. Force had been used. The report explained the force. The supervisor had signed off. That was how it was supposed to work. Holloway went home that night and slept. Not the restless sleep of a man replaying his choices, but the steady sleep of someone who believes the process is working in his favor. He had written the report. His lieutenant had approved it. The legal team had reviewed it. Every layer of the system that was supposed to protect him had done exactly what he expected it to do. He had been through reviews before. Complaints had been filed against him before. Every time, the file had closed the way he needed it to close. He had no reason to believe this time would be different. What he had not stopped to ask himself, what nobody in that department had thought to ask yet, was whether anyone had reviewed the body cam footage before approving the report. The answer was no. And somewhere across town, that footage was sitting on a server, untouched, recording a very different version of events. Monday morning arrived differently than the department expected. Brigadier General Marcus Tate, commanding general of Marine Corps Base Camp Lejeune, did not call a press conference. He did not release a statement to the media. He did not post anything online. He picked up the phone and made a request through official military channels for a formal meeting with the Fayetteville Chief of Police. That distinction mattered more than it might seem. A press release is noise. A formal request through military channels is a different kind of communication entirely. It does not ask. It arrives. It lands on a desk with the full weight of an institution behind it, and the person receiving it understands immediately that ignoring it is not a real option. The chief received it Monday morning. He was still reading it when the second letter arrived. The office of a U.S. representative with direct oversight responsibilities for military installations in North Carolina had sent a formal written request to the department. It asked for two things: that all footage from the incident be preserved immediately, and that a full incident timeline be provided to the representative's office. The letter was polite. It was also not optional. Before lunch, the Department of Defense Public Affairs Office released 4 words to the press. It was monitoring the situation. 4 words. No elaboración. No demands. Just the quiet, unmistakable signal that people with significant authority were paying attention and expected to keep paying attention until they were satisfied with what they saw. The chief called an emergency leadership meeting before 10 a.m. The room filled quickly. People who had spent the weekend assuming the story would fade were now looking at a formal request from a brigadier general, a congressional letter, and a statement from the Department of Defense, all arriving on the same morning. Internal Affairs was assigned the case by noon. The department had spent the weekend believing it controlled the timeline. By Monday afternoon, it was clear that the timeline now belonged to someone else entirely. The investigation belonged to Lieutenant Carla Simmons. She had been in Internal Affairs for 11 years, long enough to know the difference between an officer who made a bad call under pressure and an officer whose paperwork did not match reality. She did not begin with a conclusion. She began with a list. Every piece of available evidence, requested in order, reviewed in full before she formed an opinion about any of it. She pulled the dispatch audio from the afternoon of the incident. She requested footage from every security camera the gas station had on the property. She tracked down both civilian cell phone videos and obtained the full, unedited versions, not the clips that have been shared online. She requested the complete archive of the Instagram live stream, including the seconds before it was cut. And she submitted a formal request for Holloway's body cam footage. The Marine Corps Legal Office responded to her request for the base communications call log within 24 hours. They provided everything: the full audio, the timestamps, the call duration, the routing record. It was a complete and independent account of what had been said and heard from the moment Webb picked up the phone to the moment the line finally went quiet. Holloway sat down for his initial interview and cooperated without hesitation. He was calm. He restated his report almost word for word, the same flat official language, the same sequence of events, the same justification for every decision he made. He answered every question directly. He did not appear nervous. He appeared certain, the way a man appears certain when he believes the evidence is lined up behind him and the process is moving in his favor. What he had not accounted for was a detail so basic it is easy to overlook. His body cam had been running from the moment he stepped out of his cruiser. Not from the moment things escalated. Not from the moment he called for backup. From a moment his boots hit the pavement. 6 full minutes of footage before the K9 was ever unclipped. 6 minutes that included the moment Renae reached into her breast pocket, produced her military ID card, and held it out toward him. And the footage showed him looking directly at it. Simmons reached the relevant footage at 2:14 p.m. on the 3rd day of the investigation. There were 4 people in the conference room. Nobody was talking. The overhead light was on, and the blinds were half closed, the way they usually are in rooms where people are trying to see a screen clearly. Someone had set a cup of coffee on the table at the start and never touched it. The footage began with Holloway stepping out of his cruiser and moving across the lot. The camera was steady. The image was clear. There was no bad angle, no obstruction, nothing in the frame that created confusion about what was happening or in what order. It showed Renae standing beside her car, phone still at her ear, watching Holloway approach. It showed her move away from the car door, not backward, not away from him, but toward him, turning her body to face him directly. The move of someone who has nothing to hide and wants to make that clear. It showed her reach in her breast pocket. It showed her produce her military ID card and hold it out toward him. And it showed Holloway looking at the card. Not a glance. He looked at it. Then he looked at her face. Then he put his hand on his radio. He did not say a word. What followed after that, the commands, the step back, the leash unclipping the dog, all of it came after that moment. After he had seen the card. After he had looked at her face and made a decision that the footage was recorded in full. Simmons asked for it to be replayed from the moment the ID appeared. They watched it 4 times. Each time, the room stayed quiet. Each time, The same sequence played out in the same order with the same result. By the fourth viewing, nobody in that room was using the words suspicious person anymore. That framing had not survived contact with the footage. The question had changed, and everyone in that room knew it. Simmons opened Holloway's incident report and laid it flat on the table beside the footage. She went through it line by line. The report stated that the subject had refused multiple lawful commands. The body cam showed Renae stopping when told to stop, turning to face the officer, and producing her military ID within the first 90 seconds of contact. She had not refused anything. She had asked questions while complying, which is not the same thing, and the footage made that distinction impossible to miss. The report stated that the subject had moved away from the officer in a manner consistent with evasion. The body cam showed one step, a single backward step, taken after Holloway reached for her arm without explaining why he was reaching for it. There was no running. There was no turning away. There was one step, taken by a person responding to an unexplained physical advance, and the footage showed exactly that and nothing more. The report stated that K-9 deployment had followed sustained noncompliance. Simmons checked the timestamp on the body cam. The elapsed time between Holloway's first word to Renae and the moment he unclipped the leash was 4 minutes and 11 seconds. In that window, Renae had not raised her voice once. She had not reached for anything. She had not moved toward the officer aggressively. She had not attempted to leave. She had stood in a parking lot and asked questions. Simmons put down the report and shifted her notepad to a clean page. This was the moment the nature of the investigation changed. A use of force review asks whether the force was appropriate. What she was looking at now went further than that. Every material claim in the official report was contradicted by footage recorded on the officer's own body camera. That was not a matter of interpretation or perspective. That was a factual conflict between a written statement and video evidence. What had started as a review of a single incident was now something with a different name and significantly higher stakes. False official statements carry consequences that use of force reviews do not. Holloway did not know yet that the page had just turned. Simmons did not stop at the body cam footage. She kept going. Both civilian witnesses at the gas station had given formal statements. Their accounts were taken separately on different days by different members of the investigative team. Neither witness had seen the other's statement before giving their own. When Simmons compared them, they described the same sequence in the same order. Renae was calm throughout. Her hands were visible throughout. The dog was deployed before any physical resistance occurred. Not after. Before. Both witnesses said it the same way without being asked to say it that way. Linda Pruitt had also given a formal statement by this point. It was brief and it was plain. She had not seen Renae commit any act that could be described as a crime. She had not seen her behave in a way that suggested she was a threat to anyone. She had seen a woman she did not recognize doing ordinary things in a place that, for reasons Pruitt struggled to articulate, made her uncomfortable. That was the complete record of what she had witnessed. Nothing more. Then there was the base communications recording. The Marine Corps Legal Office had provided a full time-stamped audio record of the call between Renae and Webb. It ran from before Holloway arrived to after the line finally went quiet. Simmons matched it against the body cam footage, second by second. Every sound on the audio lined up with every image on the video. The sequence was identical across both records. Webb's own account of what he heard matched both of them. For independent sources. For separate records. All describing the same encounter in the same order with the same conclusion. Simmons documented the alignment across every source and wrote her central finding in plain language. There was no evidence of resistance. There was no evidence of threat. There was no evidence that the military ID had gone unrecognized. The report Holloway submitted to his department did not describe the encounter that his own camera had recorded. That finding would not stay inside the investigation for long. Holloway was suspended without pay within a week of Simmons completing her findings. The Fayetteville PD chief did not release a written statement. He held a press conference. That distinction was deliberate. A written statement can be carefully worded and quietly buried. A press conference requires a person to stand in front of cameras and answer questions, and the chief had apparently decided that the moment called for exactly that level of visibility. He acknowledged, on record, that the officer's use of force was not supported by the evidence that had been reviewed. He acknowledged that the department's internal report process had failed, that a material inconsistency between the written report and the available footage had not been caught before a supervisor signed off on it. He did not frame these as minor procedural issues. He said them plainly, the way findings that have already been documented tend to get said when there is no longer any benefit to softening them. The lieutenant who had approved Holloway's report without reviewing the body cam footage was placed on administrative review the same day. The department announced a mandatory review of K-9 deployment protocols across the entire department. Not a suggestion, not a pilot program. A mandatory review, department-wide, with a deadline attached. Brigadier General Tate released a brief statement confirming that the Marine Corps Legal Office had referred the matter to civilian authorities for further review. It was 4 sentences long. It did not need to be longer than that. The Department of Justice confirmed it had opened a civil rights inquiry into the incident. From the moment Renae hit the ground in that gas station parking lot to the moment Holloway was formally suspended without pay, 9 days had passed. 9 days from the K-9 deployment to a press conference, a suspension, an administrative review, a department-wide protocol review, a military referral, and a federal inquiry. For a system that often moves slowly when it comes to accountability, 9 days was fast. What made it move that fast was not luck. It was evidence, and the number of people who refused to let it be ignored. Renae did not hold a press conference. She released a single paragraph through the Marine Corps Public Affairs Office. No interview, no camera appearance, no lengthy statement walking through everything that had happened and how it had made her feel. Just one paragraph, plain and direct, the way she had been plain and direct in that parking lot when it mattered most. She said she never stopped believing that the record would show what happened. She had known from the first moment that she had done nothing wrong, and she had held on to that while strangers debated her actions online and the department's report described a version of events she did not recognize. She said that standing still and asking questions in that parking lot was the hardest thing she had done outside of a combat zone. Not because she was afraid, but because she knew that staying calm, when every part of her was telling her otherwise, was the only version of that moment where she came home whole. Losing control would have changed the story. She did not lose control. She thanked Darnell Webb for staying on the line. She thanked the 2 people at the pumps who pointed their phones and kept them steady when it would have been easier to look away. She said she was still a Marine. She said she still had a job to do. And then she went back to work. There was no celebration in any of that. No triumphant moment. No sense that justice had arrived and everything was now resolved. Just a woman who had been treated as a threat for existing in the wrong place in the wrong skin, who had been proven right by the evidence, and who responded to that proof the same way she had responded to everything else in that parking lot. Quietly, with her head straight, and without asking anyone's permission to move forward. This started with a woman stopping for gas. That is the whole origin of it. A public highway, broad daylight, a gas station that hundreds of people pass through every week. Renae Bowman committed no crime before Holloway arrived. She made no threat. She did not run from anyone or reach for anything or raise her voice at a single person. She filled her tank, walked into a store, walked back out, and answered a phone call. What she also did was exist in a uniform in that space in a way that one woman sitting in a parked car decided did not look right. That feeling had no evidence attached to it. It had no specific behavior to point to, no law being broken, no moment that any reasonable person could identify as dangerous. It was just a feeling, a sense that something was off, A quiet certainty that the woman in camouflage did not belong in the picture the way it was supposed to look. That feeling made a phone call. The phone call reached dispatch. Dispatch reached Holloway. Holloway reached the parking lot. The whole chain moved from a feeling to a K-9 deployment in under 15 minutes, and at no point along the way did anyone stop to ask for evidence. Just the certainty of one person passed to a second person who had spent years being allowed to act on certainty alone. And that certainty carried Holloway all the way to the moment his own body camera recorded him looking directly at Renae's military ID card, seeing it clearly, seeing her face, and reaching for his radio anyway. The assumption did not stop at the phone call. It did not stop at the cruiser door. It walked all the way into that parking lot and made every decision that followed. That is where this began. Not with a crime, with a feeling that was never questioned until a camera made it impossible to ignore. A body cam does not have an agenda. It does not decide what to record and what to leave out. It does not file a report afterward. It does not choose words carefully or frame events in a way that protects anyone. It simply records what is in front of it and holds on to it until someone presses play. Officer Holloway believed the story of what happened in that parking lot was his to tell. He wrote the report. He used the language. He submitted it through the right channels and watched his supervisor sign off on it. He believed that was enough. He was wrong. The camera told the story. The call log told it. The two people at the pumps told it. And when all three of those accounts landed on the same desk at the same time, pointing in the same direction, there was nothing left to argue about. Not a detail. Not a single line of his report survived contact with the evidence. Power moves fast when it believes no one is watching. But someone was watching. Someone had been watching from the moment Holloway stepped out of that cruiser. The camera was on. The line was open. The phones were out. Someone always is. Tell us in the comments. Do you think this outcome would have happened without the Marine Corps stepping in? Or did it take that kind of pressure to make accountability happen? Subscribe right now and turn on notifications. The next story is already waiting.